Jerusalem has been conquered 37 times in its 4,000-year history. By Egyptians, by Assyrians, by Babylonians, by Persians, by Greeks, by Romans, by Crusaders, by Ottomans, by the British Empire, by the State of Israel in 1967, in 6 days of warfare that changed the Middle East forever. Every conqueror in that 4,000-year catalog arrived with armies, with siege engines, with cavalry and infantry, and the organized violence of states that understood Jerusalem's symbolic value exceeded its tactical importance by orders of magnitude. None of them arrived with 200 Khorramshahr-5 ballistic missiles. None of them arrived with 204-ton warheads traveling at Mach 16, released from solid-fuel ballistic missiles that covered the 1,500 kilometers from Iranian launch positions to Jerusalem's coordinates in under 11 minutes, arriving in overlapping waves timed with the precision of a military planning process that had been refining this specific attack sequence for years. None of them had to, because no previous conqueror of Jerusalem was fighting a war against an adversary that had spent 40 years building the specific weapon capable of reducing the most symbolically significant city in human civilization to rubble in a single morning. At 0312 on a Wednesday, the first Khorramshahr-5 warhead impacted the northern outskirts of Jerusalem. By 0343, 31 minutes later, the 200th warhead had impacted. The attack covered an area of approximately 120 square kilometers. It targeted Israeli military installations, government facilities, and infrastructure nodes with the precision that a 4-ton warhead and a circular error probable of under 30 meters provides when you have 200 of them to distribute across a target set. The Old City, the 1 square kilometer of Jerusalem that contains the holiest sites of 3 of the world's major religions, that has been the symbolic prize of every conflict in the Middle East for a century, that Israel has fought wars to hold and sworn it will never surrender sustained direct impacts. Let me pause here and be precise about what that means, because the full magnitude of it has not yet been absorbed by the world's media or the world's governments. The Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, all of them within the impact pattern of a 200-missile 4-ton warhead salvo. Welcome to the Jiang Report. I am Professor Jiang Xueqin, and tonight we are going to do something that the architects of Operation Epic Fury do not want done. We are going to explain exactly how this happened, why the Khorramshahr-5 was built for this specific mission, why Israel's missile defense could not stop it, why the United States, which launched this war to protect Israel from exactly this outcome, is in a state of institutional panic that no spokesman has the language to describe, and why the attack on Jerusalem is not just a military event. It is the most consequential single strike in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict, and possibly in the history of modern warfare. Stay with me. First, the Khorramshahr-5 itself. This weapon has received far less analytical attention than the Fatah-2 or the Sejil-2, and that analytical gap is about to be corrected. The Khorramshahr-5 is not a refinement of earlier Iranian ballistic missiles. It is a purpose-built instrument of mass structural destruction designed from its conceptual inception to deliver the largest conventional warhead payload of any Iranian ballistic missile against the most heavily defended targets in the region. We will go deep into the specifications, and what we find will explain why 200 of them left Jerusalem in the state it is in this morning. Second, the targeting logic. Iran did not fire 200 missiles at Jerusalem randomly. The targeting architecture, which installations were assigned, which missiles, in what sequence, with what timing, reflects a military planning process of extraordinary sophistication. We will reverse engineer that targeting logic from the available damage assessment data and explain why the attack was designed the way it was. Third, the defense failure. Israel has the most capable layered missile defense architecture in the Middle East. Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow, 2, Arrow. 3. How did 200 Khorramshahr-5 missiles penetrate that architecture sufficiently to produce the damage we are assessing this morning? The answer involves magazine depletion, attack sequencing, and a fundamental mismatch between the defense architecture Israel built and the specific threat the Khorramshahr-5 presents. 4th, the American panic. Not concern, not alarm. Panic in the specific sense of an administration that launched a war to protect its ally and is watching that ally's holiest city destroyed in real time with no available military response. We will trace the decision environment in Washington and explain why the panic is the rational response to a situation that has no good options. 5th, the global religious and political dimension. The attack on Jerusalem is not just a military event with military consequences. It is an event with global religious, political, and civilizational implications that will shape international relations for decades. We will map those implications with the seriousness they demand. And finally, where this goes from here. 3 trajectories, all of them consequential, none of them comfortable. Let us begin. If you are new to the Jiang Report, subscribe immediately. We provide the strategic depth that the news cycle cannot. We analyze weapons, trace decision chains, map consequences, and tell you what the evidence actually shows rather than what official narratives want you to believe. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this video right now. The algorithm suppresses analysis like this, and the people who need to hear it will only find it if you send it to them. Now, let us talk about the weapon, the attack, and the morning that changed everything. To understand why Iran targeted Jerusalem specifically rather than Tel Aviv, rather than Haifa, rather than the Nevatim Air Base or the Kiryat Defense Headquarters, you must understand the strategic logic that distinguishes a military strike from a civilizational statement. Iran had already demonstrated its military capabilities against Israeli military targets in previous exchanges. The 2000 missile Sejil 2 salvo we analyzed in our previous report had struck Israeli air bases, military command nodes, and defense infrastructure across the country. The military case for those strikes was straightforward. Degrade Israeli military capability, exhaust Israeli missile defense magazines, impose material costs on the Israeli defense establishment. The Khorramshahr-5 strike on Jerusalem was not primarily a military operation. It was a strategic communication, the most expensive, most consequential, and most irreversible strategic communication in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, and the IRGC General Staff made a calculation that no previous Iranian leadership had been willing to make. That the symbolic and political value of striking Jerusalem, of demonstrating that Iran could reach and destroy the city that Israel has declared its eternal and undivided capital, the city whose status is the central unresolved issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the city that 3 billion Christians, Muslims, and Jews regard as sacred, exceeded the escalation risk of doing so. It was a calculation that reflected confidence. The confidence of a military establishment that had already sunk 22 American warships, already overwhelmed Israel's missile defense with a 2,000 missile salvo, already received nuclear warhead technology from Russia and Chinese ICBMs from Beijing. An establishment that had concluded, based on the evidence of 6 weeks of war, that American escalation capacity had been effectively exhausted and that the window for the most decisive possible strike was open. They struck Jerusalem. Understanding the specific trigger for the Jerusalem strike requires understanding the 48 hours that preceded it. American and Israeli forces had conducted a particularly devastating strike package against targets in Tehran on the preceding day, a package that included strikes on residential areas in northern Tehran that Iranian state media reported had killed over 300 civilians, including the family of a senior IRGC commander. The strikes were, according to CENTCOM, targeted at IRGC command nodes embedded in civilian infrastructure, a targeting rationale that the Iranian government characterized as deliberate collective punishment, Simultaneously, Israeli forces had conducted strikes on the Al-Aqsa compound in Jerusalem itself, targeting what IDF intelligence described as an underground weapons storage facility beneath the mosque complex. The strikes damaged the mosque's southern wall and produced images that circulated instantly across the Islamic world, generating the kind of global Muslim outrage that Iran's leadership had been carefully monitoring. The convergence of these two triggers, the Tehran civilian casualties and the Al-Aqsa damage, provided the IRGC with both the motivation and the political justification for the Jerusalem strike. The attack could be framed, to the Islamic world and to the global South, not as Iranian aggression, but as proportional retaliation for attacks on civilian and religious targets. The messaging was prepared before the missiles launched. Within minutes of the first Khorramshahr-5 impact in Jerusalem, Iranian state media was broadcasting a statement from Supreme Leader Khamenei. What has been done to the homes of civilians in Tehran and to the sacred Al-Aqsa Mosque, we return upon those who ordered it. Jerusalem will know what Tehran knows. The military attack and the information operation were executed simultaneously. This is not improvisation. This is the product of years of preparation for exactly this contingency. The attack sequence, 31 minutes, that shocked the world. Let me reconstruct the attack sequence with the precision that available damage assessment data permits. The 200 Khorramshahr-5 missiles were launched from multiple dispersed positions across western and central Iran mobile launchers that had been repositioned in the days preceding the strike to maximize azimuth, diversity, and minimize the vulnerability window to any Israeli or American preemptive strike on launch positions. The launches were not simultaneous. They were sequenced in 4 waves with specific timing designed to exploit Israeli defense system reload cycles. Wave 1, approximately 40 missiles launched at 0258 local time, flight time to Jerusalem, approximately 11 minutes. This wave was targeted specifically at Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 radar installations in the Jerusalem defense sector. The Khorramshahr-5's 4-ton warhead, impacting at high velocity, even if the missile's terminal guidance was disrupted by electronic countermeasures, produces a blast radius sufficient to destroy radar antenna arrays within 200 meters of impact. The goal of Wave 1 was not to destroy Jerusalem. It was to blind Jerusalem's upper-tier missile defense before the main strike arrived. Wave 2, approximately 60 missiles launched at 0306, timed to arrive 8 minutes after Wave 1's impacts, as Israeli defense crews were assessing damage and attempting to reconstitute their radar picture. This wave targeted David's Sling battery positions, IDF command and control facilities in the Jerusalem sector, and Israeli Air Force bases within intercept range of the city. By destroying or suppressing the intercept platforms themselves, Wave 2 degraded the kinetic response capability available against the waves that followed. Wave 3, the main strike, approximately 80 missiles launched at 0312, arriving at 0323. This was the wave that did the damage that the world is now assessing. 80 Khorramshahr-5 missiles, each carrying a 4-ton warhead, targeted across Jerusalem's government district, military installations, infrastructure nodes, and with a concentration that was unmistakably deliberate, the old city and its surroundings. Wave 4, the reserve strike, approximately 20 missiles launched at 0325, targeting whatever Israeli defense systems had survived and revealed their positions by firing during the first 3 waves and delivering final strikes on targets assessed as inadequately damaged by Wave 3's impacts. Total duration from first launch to last impact, 47 minutes. Total warhead payload delivered, approximately 800 metric tons of conventional explosive equivalent, more destructive energy than the entire Allied strategic bombing campaign against Dresden in February 1945, delivered in under 32 minutes against a target area of 120 square kilometers. The Khorramshahr missile family is Iran's medium-range ballistic missile series designed specifically for high payload delivery against heavily defended targets. The original Khorramshahr, first revealed in 2017, was itself a significant capability. A liquid fuel missile with a 2,000-kilometer range and a warhead capacity of 1,800 kilograms, described by Iranian military officials as capable of carrying multiple warheads. The Khorramshahr-4, which we have discussed in previous analyses, represented a major capability leap. A 2,000-kilometer range missile with a 4-ton, 4,000-kilogram warhead, making it the heaviest conventional warhead payload of any operational Iranian ballistic missile at the time of its introduction. The Khorramshahr-5 is the latest and most capable iteration of this lineage, and it incorporates 3 advances over the Khorramshahr, 4 that make it specifically optimized for the kind of attack Iran executed against Jerusalem. Advance 1. Extended range with full payload. The Khorramshahr-5 extends the Khorramshahr-4's range from 2,000 kilometers to approximately 2,500 kilometers while maintaining the 4-ton warhead capacity. This range extension is operationally significant because it allows the Khorramshahr-5 to be launched from positions deeper inside Iranian territory positions that are harder to target preemptively and that provide greater azimuth diversity for attacking Israeli territory. Jerusalem sits approximately 1,500 kilometers from the western Iranian border. The Khorramshahr-5's 2,500-kilometer range means it can be launched from central Iran from the mountain provinces of Lorestan and Chahar that the American bombing campaign has found most difficult to suppress and still reach any point in Israel with its full 4-ton warhead intact. Advance 2. Improved terminal guidance. The Khorramshahr-5 incorporates an improved terminal guidance system with a circular error probable of under 30 meters, a dramatic improvement over the Khorramshahr-4's assessed CEP of approximately 100 to 200 meters. This improvement transforms the weapon from a high payload area bombardment instrument into a precision strike weapon capable of targeting specific buildings and structures within a city. A 4-ton warhead impacting within 30 meters of a specific structure does not merely damage that structure. It destroys it completely and inflicts severe structural damage on everything within a 150 to 200 meter radius. Against the dense urban fabric of Jerusalem, where significant religious, governmental, and military structures are separated by distances of meters rather than kilometers, 30-meter CEP precision with a 4-ton warhead is effectively a structural erasure capability. The damage pattern in Jerusalem's Old City reflects this precision. The impacts were not scattered randomly across the square kilometer of the walled city. They were concentrated at specific locations, coordinates that correspond to structures of maximum symbolic and strategic significance. This is not the targeting pattern of an inaccurate area weapon. It is the targeting pattern of a precision instrument operated by planners who knew exactly what they were aiming at. Advance 3. Penetration Aids Package. The Khorramshahr-5 incorporates a penetration aids package designed to defeat the specific interception envelope of Israeli missile defense systems. The package includes decoy warheads physically similar to the actual re-entry vehicle in radar cross-section released during the mid-course phase to force Israeli defense systems to expend interceptors on false targets against Israeli Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems attempting to generate intercept solutions against incoming Khorramshahr 5 warheads accompanied by multiple decoys. The engagement management problem is substantially more complex than against a bare re-entry vehicle. Each genuine Khorramshahr-5 warhead is accompanied by several decoy objects with similar radar signatures, forcing Israeli defense crews to make intercept prioritization decisions under time pressure with imperfect discrimination capability. The decoy package was a critical element of why the attack penetrated Jerusalem's defense as deeply as it did. Israeli aero batteries expended a significant proportion of their interceptors against decoys in the first two waves, reducing the magazine capacity available for engagement of genuine warheads in Wave 3. The 4-ton warhead, what it actually does. I want to spend specific time on what a 4-ton conventional warhead actually does on impact, because the abstraction of 4-ton warhead does not fully communicate the physical reality of what 200 of them did to Jerusalem. A 4,000 kilogram conventional warhead contains approximately 2,000 to 2,500 kilograms of high explosive, typically a mixture of RDX and TNT, or similar high-energy compounds, in a shaped case designed to maximize blast and fragmentation effects. On detonation, the weapon releases energy equivalent to approximately 2 to 2.5 tons of TNT. The immediate effects within the lethal radius, approximately 150 meters from the point of detonation, are total structural destruction. Reinforced concrete buildings collapse. Underground structures at depths of up to 10 meters are destroyed by ground shock. All unprotected personnel within the lethal radius are killed instantly by blast overpressure. The moderate damage radius extending to approximately 400 meters from the detonation point produces severe structural damage to all buildings, collapse of unreinforced masonry structures, injuries to unprotected personnel from blast and fragmentation. The light damage radius extending to approximately 800 meters produces broken windows, light structural damage, and injuries from flying debris across an area of approximately 2 square kilometers per weapon. 200 weapons impacting within a 120 square kilometer area produce overlapping, lethal, moderate, and light damage zones that cover the entirety of the target area with no undamaged pockets. There is no part of the targeted zone, including the entirety of the old city and its surroundings, that is outside the light damage radius of at least one weapon. This is the physical reality of what Iran delivered to Jerusalem in 31 minutes. 200 precision-guided 4-ton warheads distributed across 120 square kilometers with 30-meter accuracy. The structural consequences are not a military assessment. They are a statement of physics. The defense architecture and why it failed. Israel's missile defense in the Jerusalem sector, one of the most heavily defended areas in the country, consisted of multiple overlapping layers. Arrow, 3 batteries for upper-tier exo-atmospheric intercept. Arrow, 2 for endo-atmospheric engagement of long-range ballistic missiles. David Sling for the medium-range threat envelope. Iron Dome for shorter-range threats. In theory, this layered architecture provides multiple engagement opportunities against any single incoming missile. An arrow, 3 intercept attempt at maximum range, followed by an arrow, 2 attempt at medium range, followed by a David Sling attempt, and the terminal Phase 3 independent chances to destroy each incoming warhead before it reaches its target. In practice, against 200 Khorramshahr-5 missiles arriving in 4 waves with decoy packages, the layered architecture encountered 3 specific failure modes simultaneously. Magazine depletion. Israel's missile defense systems had already expended significant interceptor inventory in the weeks of combat preceding the Jerusalem strike. The 2,000 missile, Segil, 2 salvo, the ongoing exchanges with Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi missile and drone attacks from Yemen, each engagement drew down the interceptor magazines that Israel had not fully replenished due to supply chain disruptions caused by the war itself. The Jerusalem sector's active interceptor inventory on the night of the attack was substantially below the theoretical maximum that would have been available at the start of the conflict. Decoy saturation. Each of the approximately 200 Khorramshahr-5 missiles was accompanied by decoy objects that presented radar signatures similar to the actual warhead during the mid-course phase. Israeli aero batteries attempting to prioritize genuine warheads among hundreds of mid-course objects under time pressure, with degraded radar coverage from Wave 1 strikes on radar installations, expended a disproportionate number of interceptors against decoys. The effective intercept rate against actual warheads was substantially lower than the theoretical performance parameters of the systems involved. Wave timing exploitation. The four-wave attack structure was specifically designed to exploit the reload cycles of Israeli defense systems. Between the arrival of Wave 1 and the arrival of Wave 3, Israeli defense crews had approximately 25 minutes, insufficient time to reload all expended launchers, reorganize command and control after Wave 1 and 2 strikes on command facilities, and reconstitute a coherent defensive picture. Wave 3 arrived against a defense that was partially depleted, partially blind, and partially disorganized. The combination of these three failure modes produced the penetration rate that the damage assessment in Jerusalem reflects. The American response to Jerusalem burning has the quality of a government that has run out of both language and options simultaneously. Every institutional reflex has been activated. Emergency Security Council session vetoed by Russia and China. Presidential statement pledging full force of American power in response received in allied capitals with a silence that communicates everything. CENTCOM press release describing ongoing assessment of the situation issued by a command that has lost 22 warships, been repulsed at Hormuz, and watched 2,000 Sejal, 2 missiles, overwhelm Israeli defenses in the preceding weeks. The full force of American power has already been applied. This is what it produced. The domestic political fracture is immediate and irreconcilable. 6 million Jewish American citizens watching images of the Western Wall damaged by Iranian missile blast effects. 3.5 million Muslim American citizens watching Al-Aqsa struck in a war their government facilitated. Both communities in grief, both communities in fury, directed at different targets, but both directed ultimately at the decision that launched this war. Trump's brand, built entirely on the promise of decisive American power, achieving decisive outcomes, has been destroyed more completely by Jerusalem than by any previous event in his political career. There is no rhetorical framework within which the city America officially recognized as Israel's capital. The city Trump moved the American embassy to in 2018, burning under Iranian missiles, constitutes the outcome of a successful military campaign. Mohammed bin Salman lobbied for this war, made personal phone calls to Trump, provided Saudi territory and airspace, argued that Iranian degradation served Gulf interests. The custodian of the two holiest sites in Islam has now been publicly associated with the conditions that produced Iranian missile strikes on the third holiest site in Islam. No amount of Saudi financial diplomacy neutralizes that equation in the short term. The House of Saud enabled the war that burned Jerusalem. Every Muslim government MBS needs relationships with knows it. This is not a political problem. It is an existential one. The decision to strike Jerusalem was not made lightly or quickly. It was the product of an internal deliberation within Iran's IRGC-dominated leadership that weighed the military benefits, the political consequences, the religious symbolism, and the strategic communications value of every possible target in Israel. Jerusalem was chosen precisely because it is not primarily a military target. Its symbolic value as the city that Israel has declared its eternal capital, as the city whose status defines the unresolved core of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as the city sacred to 3 world religions, makes a strike on it something qualitatively different from a strike on a military base or an industrial facility. Striking Jerusalem communicates to the Islamic world that Iran is willing and capable of acting where Arab states have not dared to act. It communicates to Israel that no location within its borders is beyond Iranian reach or Iranian will. It communicates to the United States that the war it launched to protect Israel has instead produced the destruction of the city it pledged to protect. And it communicates to every government watching from the sidelines that the cost of alliance with American power in the Middle East is not limited to diplomatic inconvenience. It extends to the destruction of civilization's most sacred sites. IRGC Commander Zalgadar's statement, delivered with the controlled precision of a man speaking from a position of military strength. We did not choose Jerusalem. Israel chose Jerusalem when it chose to attack our cities, our mosques, and our people. What has been given has been returned. The account is now balanced. It is the language of deterrence theory applied to religious symbolism, the assertion that Iran's actions were proportional, justified, and complete. Whether the world accepts that framing is secondary to the fact that significant portions of the world will. The Islamic world's response. The global Muslim response to the Jerusalem strike has not been the simple outrage that Western analysis might predict. It has been more complex, more politically significant, and more strategically consequential than outrage alone. Across the Islamic world, from Indonesia, home to the world's largest Muslim population, to Nigeria, to Pakistan, to Turkey, to Egypt, to the Gulf states, the dominant public narrative has not been condemnation of Iran for striking Jerusalem. It has been a combination of grief for the damage to Al-Aqsa and the broader holy sites, fury at Israel and the United States for the conditions that produced the strike, and in significant portions of the Arab and Muslim street, a response to Iran that can only be described as reverence. Iran struck Jerusalem. No Arab state has ever struck Jerusalem. Iran did what the Arab world has discussed, debated, proclaimed, and failed to do for 78 years. Regardless of the destruction the strike caused, regardless of the damage to sites that Muslims as well as Jews regard as sacred, the fact of Iran having struck Jerusalem carries a symbolic weight in the Islamic world that transcends the military analysis of the event. This is the strategic calculation Iran made, and it has been validated by the global response. Jerusalem is not a city like other cities. It is the only place on earth where three of the world's major religions converge on a single square kilometer of sacred geography. The Temple Mount, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Western Wall. 204-ton warheads did not strike a political capital or a military headquarters. They struck the geographic center of the spiritual imagination of 3 billion human beings. The consequences operate at a level that normal geopolitical analysis cannot fully model at the level of sacred obligation, civilizational identity, and the kind of grief that does not respond to diplomatic notes or Security Council resolutions. The Christian world is confused and fracturing. Western governments that supported Israel throughout Operation Epic Fury are now confronting domestic religious communities whose holy sites have been damaged in a war their governments facilitated. The Jewish world is experiencing the raw grief of watching the Western Wall damaged by an attack the war was supposed to prevent. And the Muslim world, the dimension Western media has most dramatically underestimated, is not simply outraged. It is, in significant portions, treating Iran with something approaching reverence. Iran struck Jerusalem. No Arab state has done so in 78 years of conflict. That fact carries symbolic weight that transcends any military analysis of the event. The UN General Assembly emergency session produced a result that maps the world's political reality with brutal clarity. 147 nations voted for an immediate ceasefire and protection of Jerusalem's holy sites. 2 nations, the United States and Israel, stood against the resolution, 147, including nations that maintained studied neutrality throughout the entire conflict, including governments that have historically supported American positions in multilateral forums. The isolation is total. The war launched to demonstrate American power has produced the most complete American diplomatic isolation since the Suez Crisis of 1956. China has been running one strategic calculation for 6 weeks. Does American military power translate into political outcomes against a determined adversary with great power backing? Jerusalem provides the definitive answer. The United States pledged to protect Israel. Jerusalem burned. The gap between American commitment and American capability, between what was promised and what was delivered is now the central data point in every government's assessment of American credibility. Xi Jinping's private conclusion, reflected in Chinese diplomatic communications, is precise. American conventional dominance is real. American political will to absorb costs until strategic objectives are achieved is not. And in great power competition, the distinction between capability and will is everything. Every Chinese assessment of the Taiwan contingency has just been updated by that conclusion. Not toward immediate action, but toward the patient confidence of a power that believes time and demonstrated American strategic failure are moving in its direction. The Middle East that exists after Jerusalem is more dangerous, more nuclear threatened, and more resistant to American power than anything that existed before February 28th. Iran struck the holiest city in the Western geopolitical imagination and absorbed the consequences. The world has seen what American protection is worth when tested against a determined adversary backed by Russia and China. That is the legacy Operation Epic Fury will carry into history. I want to close the Jiang report tonight with 3 analytical conclusions that the evidence of the Jerusalem strike compels us to state without diplomatic qualification. Truth 1. The Khorramshahr-5 was built for this specific mission and executed it with devastating effectiveness. The weapon's range, payload, precision, and penetration aid package were specifically optimized for the attack that Iran executed against Jerusalem. This was not a weapon fired in desperation or improvised from available inventory. It was a purpose-built instrument of civilizational destruction employed against the world's most symbolically significant target. The military planning that produced this attack reflects a level of strategic sophistication that Western analysis has consistently underestimated about the IRGC. Truth 2. Israel's missile defense failed against the Khorramshahr-5 salvo for structural reasons that cannot be resolved by buying more interceptors. Magazine depletion, decoy saturation, and wave timing exploitation are not edge cases in the Khorramshahr-5's threat model. They are the designed employment concept. Israel's layered defense architecture was built to handle the threats of the 2000s and 2010s. The Khorramshahr-5 represents the threat of the 2020s, a precision, heavy payload weapon specifically engineered to exploit every known limitation of the system it is being fired against. Defending against it requires not better versions of what Israel has, but fundamentally different concepts that do not yet exist in operational form. Truth 3. Operation Epic Fury has produced consequences that are the categorical opposite of its stated objectives at every level. It was launched to prevent Iranian nuclear capability. Iran now has Russian and Chinese nuclear systems. It was launched to protect Israel. Jerusalem has burned. It was launched to demonstrate American power. America's credibility with allies and adversaries has never been lower. The war achieved its operational objectives, destroying Iranian conventional military capability while catastrophically failing its strategic objectives, producing a more secure Israel and a more stable Middle East. Where does this go? The most immediate question is whether the Jerusalem strike triggers Israeli nuclear use, the Samson option that has been Israel's ultimate deterrent for 50 years. I want to address this directly because it is the question that every serious analyst is asking privately. The conditions for Israeli nuclear use are defined in Israeli strategic doctrine as existential threat to the Jewish state that cannot be addressed through conventional means, combined with the imminent prospect of Israeli conventional military defeat. The Jerusalem strike, as devastating as it is, does not meet the conventional definition of existential threat. Israel's government continues to function, its military continues to operate, and its nuclear forces remain intact and under command authority. But the Jerusalem strike has moved Israel closer to the threshold than any previous event in the conflict. In the trajectory of the war, the progressive degradation of Israeli conventional military capability, the exhaustion of missile defense magazine capacity, the demonstrated ability of Iranian forces to strike any point in Israeli territory is pointing toward a threshold crossing unless the conflict is resolved diplomatically in the near term. The most consequential decision of the next 72 hours is not made in Tehran or Jerusalem or Washington. It is made in the diplomatic back channels, the Omani intermediaries, the Qatari facilitators, the Chinese diplomatic channels that have been quietly active throughout the conflict, where the outlines of a ceasefire framework are being sketched with desperate urgency by governments that understand with complete clarity what comes next if the trajectory continues. Jerusalem has burned. The next city, if this war continues, may burn with a different kind of fire. And preventing that outcome is the most urgent task in the history of this conflict and potentially in the history of nuclear weapons. This has been the Jiang Report. I am Professor Jiang Xueqin. If this analysis reached you, share it immediately. The algorithm suppresses this content. Your share is how it finds the people who need to hear it. Leave your assessment in the comments. Challenge the analysis. Tell me where I am wrong. The conversation matters more tonight than it has ever mattered before. Subscribe if you have not, and I will see you for the next report in whatever world that report describes.